My name is Olivia Carter. I'm 28 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your relationship starts breaking apart is that it usually doesn't begin with one huge betrayal. It begins with repetition, with one boundary crossed, then crossed again. One dismissive laugh, one small humiliation. One sentence you hear so many times, it starts to feel like part of the wallpaper in your life. You tell yourself not to overreact. You tell yourself love is messy. You tell yourself every couple has sore spots. And then one day, the thing you kept shrinking yourself to survive becomes the very thing that wakes you up. I had been with my boyfriend for 3 years. We lived together for about 18 months in an apartment where I paid around 70% of the rent because I made more money. At the time, I didn't think much about that arrangement. I loved him. I thought we were building something. When you believe you're building a future with someone, you stop keeping score in places you probably should. That part matters later. But the real issue wasn't money. It was her. His ex-girlfriend had been in his life since college. That, on its own, wasn't the problem. I'm not one of those women who believes men and women can't stay friends after history, or that every lingering connection is automatically suspicious. My own best friend is a man I've known since high school. There has never been anything romantic between us. Not once. We're practically family at this point. So this was never about insecurity. It was about the difference between a friendship and whatever twisted little orbit my boyfriend still lived in with his ex. For context, she texted him constantly. Not occasionally. Not in some harmless, once-in-a-while way. Constantly. We would be halfway through a movie and his phone would light up every few minutes. Buzz, buzz, buzz. He'd glance down, smile faintly, type something back. Sometimes I'd look over and catch a word like, babe, or miss you, or you know me better than anyone. Not enough to start a fight over one individual text, just enough to leave a bad taste in my mouth. The first time I brought it up, I did it carefully. I remember standing in our kitchen, leaning against the counter while he rinsed out a coffee mug. I said, "Does she always call you babe?" He laughed, not because it was funny, because he wanted it to sound ridiculous. "Olivia," he said, shaking his head, "you cannot be serious." "I am serious. It's just how she talks." I stared at him for a second. To her ex-boyfriend? He rolled his eyes then, dried his hands, and gave me that expression I would come to hate. The one that suggested I was making life harder than it needed to be. "She's been in my life way longer than you have," he said. "You need to stop making everything weird." That phrase stayed with me, not just because of what it meant, but because of how easily he said it, as if my discomfort was an inconvenience, as if I was the disruption, not the behavior. And it didn't stop there. She showed up at our apartment unannounced multiple times, almost always when I was at work. I'd come home and notice some trace of her in the place I paid most of the bills for. A coffee cup left in the sink that wasn't mine, a bakery box on the counter, a throw pillow moved, a faint, expensive perfume hanging in the air like proof of occupation. He would mention it after the fact, like it was nothing. "Oh, by the way, she stopped by earlier." As if that explained anything. As if a woman who used to date my boyfriend letting herself into our space while I was gone was just one of those silly everyday details I should learn to be cool about. She also had this habit of making comments that hid behind humor. That kind of woman. The kind who insults you with a smile and counts on everyone's discomfort to protect her from being challenged. Once at a birthday dinner for one of his friends, she laughed and said, "I still can't believe you ended up settling down this early. I thought you'd hold out for someone a little more exciting." Then she smiled at me over the rim of her wine glass, like we were all in on the joke together. I waited for him to say something. He didn't. He just smirked awkwardly and muttered, "That's just her sense of humor." Her sense of humor. My humiliation. His silence. That was the pattern. I brought up my discomfort 5 or 6 times over the course of a year, maybe more. Each time, I tried a slightly different version of honesty. I told him it bothered me how often she interrupted our time together. I told him I didn't like her showing up unannounced. I told him some of her comments felt disrespectful. I told him I didn't want to feel like I was competing with a woman who was supposed to be in his past. Every single time, I got the same answer in one form or another. She's important to me. She's not going anywhere. You're reading too much into this. You need to accept that she's part of my life. Deal with it. Deal with it. He said it so many times over that year, it began to feel like our actual relationship philosophy. Not, let's work through it. Not, I hear you. Not, what would make you feel respected. Just deal with it. Deal with the texts. Deal with the pet names. Deal with the drop-ins. Deal with the jokes. Deal with the fact that another woman had permanent emotional access to him, while I was expected to be endlessly understanding. So when our 3-year anniversary came up, I wanted, stupidly, hopefully, for it to mean something. I made reservations at this beautiful Italian restaurant downtown. Not absurdly expensive, but intimate enough to feel special. Soft lighting, dark wood, the kind of place where conversations lower naturally because the room itself seems to ask for care. I booked it a week ahead. I even found an outfit he once said was his favorite on me. I told myself, maybe this could be one of those reset nights couples talk about later. The night where you finally reconnect. The night that reminds you what's worth saving. Because if I'm honest, things had felt distant for a while. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just off. Like I was living beside him instead of with him. Like some invisible third presence had been sitting between us for months, smiling quietly while I kept pretending not to see it. Then, 2 days before dinner, he dropped the sentence that changed everything. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, while I stood near the dining table, checking a work email. He said it casually, the way people mention picking up dry cleaning. "Oh, by the way," he said, "I invited her to dinner on Friday." I looked up. "What?" He barely glanced at me. "She's having a rough time. Some breakup situation. She needs to get out of the house." I remember staring at him for a solid 10 seconds. Not because I didn't hear him, because I did. And my brain was trying to decide whether he had actually just said what I thought he said. "You invited your ex-girlfriend," I said slowly, "to our anniversary dinner?" He finally looked at me then, already annoyed by my tone. "It's not a big deal." I let out a small laugh, not amused, just stunned. "Not a big deal? We can celebrate any time," he said. "She needs support right now. Our anniversary is literally once a year. Why are you being selfish?" That word landed harder than I expected. Selfish. I had spent a year swallowing discomfort to keep the peace. A year trying to be measured, mature, understanding. A year making room for his loyalty to another woman, while getting less and less of him in return. And now, I was selfish. He leaned back against the couch and said it again, with that same careless confidence I had come to know too well. "She's part of my life. Deal with it." Something in me went very still. No shouting, no tears, no dramatic scene. Just stillness. Like a switch flipping. Like a door inside me quietly unlocking. I looked at him for another moment, then smiled. Not because I was happy, because all at once, I was done asking for permission to matter. "You know what?" I said lightly. "Absolutely. Bring her." He frowned a little, suspicious now. "Really?" "Really." He sat up straighter. "That's surprisingly mature." I almost laughed at that. Instead, I said, "Actually, I'll invite my best friend, too. We can make it a group dinner." His expression changed instantly. "Your best friend?" he said. "The guy?" I held his gaze. "Yeah," I said. "He's part of my life. You need to deal with it." For a second, his face did something strange. Not outrage exactly, not even anger. Recognition, maybe. The ugly flicker of someone hearing their own words come back sharper than they expected. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me more than anything he could have said. Because suddenly, it wasn't harmless. Suddenly, it wasn't just friendship. Suddenly, it wasn't me being dramatic. Now that the dynamic reflected back onto him, now he could feel the edge of it. He tried to recover quickly. "Whatever," he muttered. "Do what you want." I nodded. "I will." Later that evening, I called my best friend. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" That was the first thing he asked. Not "what's up?" Not "can I call you back?" Just, "You okay?" And maybe that alone should have told me something about the difference between being loved and being merely tolerated. I told him everything. The anniversary dinner, the invitation, the selfish comment, the deal with it line, again. He was quiet for a beat after I finished. Then he said, very carefully, "You want me to come to your anniversary dinner because your boyfriend invited his ex-girlfriend?" "Pretty much." Another silence. Then, "Olivia, that's messed up." "I know." "You sure you want to do this?" I looked around the apartment while I held the phone. The apartment I had tried so hard to make feel like home. The framed prints I picked out, the lamp I assembled myself, the neutral rug he once said he didn't care about, even though I spent 2 weekends searching for one that fit the room. "No," I said honestly. "I'm sure I don't want to keep pretending this is normal." His voice softened. "I'll be there." No speech, no performance, no making it about him. Just, "I'll be there." After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, with one hand resting on the counter. I should tell you that at this point, part of me still hoped the dinner might force some kind of truth into the open. Not necessarily the worst truth. I wasn't sitting there convinced he was sleeping with her. It was uglier and harder to define than that. It was the possibility that maybe physical betrayal wasn't even the point. Maybe the point was that he kept choosing her comfort over my dignity, her access over my peace, her presence over the sanctity of moments that were supposed to belong to us. And maybe what I was about to do wasn't revenge. Maybe it was just the first honest mirror I had ever held up to him. The night of the dinner came with the kind of cold, clear air that makes everything feel sharper. I got dressed slowly. Did my makeup twice because my hands were unsteady the first time. Changed earrings at the last minute. Stood in front of the mirror longer than I want to admit, trying to look like a woman who was calm, desirable, untouchable. Trying not to look like a woman whose heart had already started breaking before the evening even began. When we left the apartment, he was in a good mood. That, more than anything, made me feel hollow. He whistled softly while locking the door, checked his phone on the elevator ride down, smiled at something on the screen. Probably her. I said nothing, because by then, words felt wasted. As we drove to the restaurant, city lights sliding across the windshield, I had the strangest feeling. Not panic, not dread, something colder. The sense that I was approaching a moment that would divide my life into before and after. I didn't know yet exactly how ugly it would get. Didn't know how fast truth could rip through the surface of a carefully managed relationship. Didn't know that 12 minutes at one dinner table would expose more than the past year of conversations ever had. But I knew this: I was done being the woman who just dealt with it. The restaurant was already glowing when we arrived. Soft amber lighting, low conversation humming in the background, glasses clinking gently, like everything inside that space was designed to feel warm, intimate, safe. It almost made me laugh, because nothing about what was about to happen was going to be any of those things. We stepped inside, gave the host our name, and before she could even lead us to the table, I saw them. Him and her. Already seated, already comfortable, already settled into a space that was supposed to belong to us. She waved the second she saw us, bright, effortless, like she'd been waiting for this moment, like this wasn't an intrusion, like this was exactly where she was supposed to be. Something tightened in my chest. I turned slightly toward my boyfriend. "You told her the time before you told me." He didn't even deny it. "She likes to be early," he said casually. "Of course she does." We walked over. She stood up halfway, leaned in, and gave him a quick side hug like muscle memory. Then she looked at me, smiling just enough to be polite. "Happy anniversary," she said. I nodded. "Thanks." We sat down, and that's when it happened. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. He sat next to her, not across from me, not even hesitating, just next to her. At our anniversary dinner, I felt it like a quiet crack somewhere deep inside my ribs. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because 5 minutes later, the other half of this equation walked in. My best friend. He looked exactly like himself. Calm, grounded, put together without trying too hard. There was no performance in him. No need to impress. Just quiet confidence. The kind that comes from knowing who you are and not needing to prove it. He spotted me, smiled, and walked over. "Hey," he said softly. He hugged me. Warm, familiar, steady. And for a second, I let myself lean into it just a little longer than usual. Because I needed that. Because I hadn't realized how tense my body had been until I felt what safe actually felt like. He pulled back and sat down beside me. Across the table, I watched the shift happen instantly. My boyfriend's ex leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to signal curiosity sharpened with something else. "Who's this?" she asked. There it was. The moment. The line I had been carrying with me all evening, sitting quietly on my tongue, waiting for its cue. I smiled. And I said it. "This is the man who actually appreciates me." Silence. Not awkward silence. Not confused silence. The kind of silence that lands like a dropped glass in the middle of a quiet room. Sharp. Immediate. Impossible to ignore. My boyfriend's face changed first, color rising fast, jaw tightening. "Excuse me?" he said. I didn't look away. "You heard me." His ex let out a short laugh, like she thought this was a joke she hadn't fully caught yet. "Oh, we're doing comparisons now?" she said. I tilted my head slightly. "You started that game a long time ago." My boyfriend leaned forward. "Olivia, what the hell is that supposed to mean?" I let out a breath. Slow. Controlled. "It means," I said, "he shows up when I need him. He listens when I talk. He doesn't make me feel like I'm competing for attention in my own relationship. And he definitely doesn't invite other people into moments that are supposed to matter." Her smile faded. "Other people?" she said. "I'm not other people." I met her gaze. "And he's not?" I said quietly. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Then she leaned back, crossing her arms. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. But my best friend spoke before it could spiral sideways. "Calm, even. Not aggressive." "I don't think it's ridiculous," he said. All three of them looked at him. He glanced at my boyfriend, then back at her. "I've known Olivia for 12 years, he continued, and I've never once crossed a boundary that would make her partner uncomfortable." My boyfriend scoffed. "Oh, please." But my best friend didn't raise his voice. He just said, "How long have you been texting him, 'Good morning, handsome,' every day?" That landed harder than anything I'd said. Because it wasn't emotional. It was factual. Her face froze. My boyfriend's head snapped toward her. "What?" he said. She blinked. What are you talking about?" My best friend didn't even look at her this time. He looked at me, and in that look, there was something quiet and steady. Support. Not control. Not interference. Just, "I've got you." I turned to my boyfriend. "She doesn't know?" I asked softly. His expression shifted again. Confusion. Suspicion. Something darker starting to creep in. "Olivia," he said slowly. "What is he talking about?" I held his gaze. "I told him," I said, "because I needed someone to talk to about this." "You've been talking about our relationship with him?" he snapped. And there it was. Not concern, not guilt, not even curiosity about what had pushed me there. Just outrage that I had gone somewhere else to be heard. Something in my chest finally snapped into place. Clean. Final. "You've been prioritizing her over our entire relationship for over a year," I said, my voice steady. "I've tried talking to you, over and over again." He shook his head, already defensive. That's not true. You told me to deal with it. That's not. You told me to deal with it, I repeated. So I found someone who actually gives a damn about how I feel. The table felt smaller suddenly, tighter. Like all the air had been pulled out of it. His ex shifted uncomfortably. This is getting out of hand, she said. You're making a scene. I turned to her. No, I said quietly. This has been a scene for a long time. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. My boyfriend pushed his chair back slightly. You're embarrassing me, he said through clenched teeth. And that was almost funny. Yeah, I said. Now you know how I felt. For a moment, no one spoke. Then his ex tried to step in again. Look, she said, leaning forward, voice softer now, almost rehearsed. Maybe we should all just calm down. You're clearly feeling insecure and… Stop! The word came out sharper than I expected. Not loud. Just final. Genuinely, I added, looking directly at her. Just stop. She blinked, startled. You've been circling this relationship since day one, I said. Making comments, showing up uninvited, texting him constantly like you still have a claim. Everyone sees it. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Everyone, I repeated. Except him. My boyfriend slammed his hand lightly against the table. That's enough, he snapped. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Am I? I thought. Or am I just finally saying it out loud? My best friend shifted slightly beside me. Maybe we should all take a breath, he said quietly. But it was too late for that, because right then, exactly 12 minutes after we had sat down, my boyfriend stood up, fast enough that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is insane, he said. I'm not sitting here for this. He grabbed his jacket. His ex stood immediately, following his movement without hesitation. Of course she did. She always did. I can't believe you did this, he added, looking down at me. On our anniversary. I held his gaze. I can't believe you did this, I said back. At all. For a second, something like uncertainty flickered across his face. Then it hardened. You're unbelievable, he muttered, and then he walked away. She followed him without a word, not even a glance back, just gone. Like that, the table fell silent again, but this time, it wasn't sharp. It was empty, the kind of silence that comes after something breaks clean in two. I sat there for a moment, staring at the space where they had been. 3 years. Gone in 12 minutes. Or maybe finally revealed in 12 minutes. The waiter approached cautiously, like he wasn't sure if we were about to throw plates. Are you still dining with us? He asked. I looked up at him, then at my best friend. He gave me a small, reassuring nod. And for the first time that night, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace. Not yet, but clarity. Yes, I said. We are. We ordered. We ate. And for the next 2 hours, he let me talk. About everything. The texts, the comments, the feeling of always being second. The way I had slowly started doubting my own instincts just to keep the relationship intact. He didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. Didn't tell me what I should have done differently. He just listened. The way someone does when they actually care about understanding you, not correcting you. At some point, I realized my shoulders had dropped, that the tightness in my chest had eased just a little, but I wasn't bracing for the next dismissive comment or eye roll. And that realization hit harder than anything else that night, because it made one thing painfully clear. What I had been asking for all along wasn't unreasonable. It was just being asked of the wrong person. When we finally left the restaurant, the city felt different, quieter. Not because the world had changed, but because something inside me had. I didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if this was the end or just the beginning of something worse. But I knew this. I wasn't going back to being the woman who swallowed her discomfort just to keep someone else comfortable. Something had shifted, and there was no undoing it. I expected a war when I got home, not a subtle one, not a quiet, cold shoulder kind of conflict. I expected raised voices echoing off the walls, accusations thrown like glass, doors slammed hard enough to shake the frame, because that's what moments like that usually lead to. An explosion at the restaurant, followed by a bigger one at home. But when I opened the apartment door, it was quiet. Too quiet. No lights on in the living room. No sound from the kitchen. No sign that anyone had been there recently. For a second, I just stood in the doorway, keys still in my hand, listening. Nothing. Then I noticed it. His shoes were gone. That tight, hollow feeling returned immediately. I walked further inside, set my bag down slowly, and checked the bedroom. Empty. Closet door slightly open. A few hangers missing. Not everything. Just enough. My phone buzzed. One message. From him. We need space. You embarrassed me. I stared at the screen for a long time. No apology. No acknowledgement. No curiosity about why things had gotten to that point. Just that. You embarrassed me. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I took a shower, got into bed, my bed, the one I paid for most of, and lay there, staring at the ceiling. 3 years. Reduced to a sentence. You embarrassed me. The next morning, I woke up to 17 texts, all from him. None of them an apology. I read through them slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed. I can't believe you brought him. You made it look like something was going on between you two. Everyone in that restaurant probably thinks you're cheating on me. My ex thinks you owe both of us an apology. That last one actually made me laugh. Out loud, alone in my bedroom. He thought I owed him an apology. That told me everything I needed to know about how he saw the situation, about how little of it he actually understood. I typed one message back, just one. When you're ready to have an adult conversation about boundaries, let me know. Then I put my phone down and went about my day. 8 hours of silence. Then the door unlocked. I looked up from the couch where I'd been working on my laptop, and there they were. Both of them. Standing in my living room like this was a joint meeting. Like this was a negotiation. Like I was outnumbered. His ex walked in first, like she belonged there. Of course she did. She always had. Okay, she said, already speaking, already taking control of a situation that wasn't hers. We need to clear the air. I raised my hand. Not aggressively, just enough to stop her. You don't live here, I said calmly. You don't get to mediate my relationship. Please leave. The room went still. My boyfriend stepped forward immediately. Don't talk to her like that. I looked at him. Then ask her to leave, I said, so we can talk. Privately. Like people who are actually in a relationship. And that was the moment everything crystallized. Because he hesitated. Not long, not dramatic, but long enough. Long enough for me to see the calculation behind his eyes. Long enough for me to realize he was actually considering whether he wanted her to stay. Her, not me, her. His ex smiled slightly, a small, satisfied curve of her lips. See, she said softly. He wants me here. Maybe that should tell you something. It did. It told me everything. I closed my laptop slowly, set it aside, stood up, and without another word, I walked to the bedroom. Behind me, I heard his voice. Olivia, what are you doing? I didn't answer. I opened the closet, pulled out a bag, and started packing. Not everything, just what I needed.
Clothes. Documents. Essentials.
The things that mattered. He followed me in, frustration already rising. You're seriously doing this right now? I zipped the bag halfway. I'm staying with a friend for a few days. You can't just leave. I looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I didn't feel that instinct to soften, to explain.
To reassure.
Watch me, I said. His expression shifted. Anger, disbelief, something close to panic. Where are you going? He demanded. I paused. Then tilted my head slightly. Does it matter? He frowned. What is that supposed to mean? It means, I said quietly, you've never cared about boundaries before. Why start now? That hit him. I saw it. But it wasn't enough, because right then, His ex appeared in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, watching. Always watching. And that image, her standing there, comfortable, present, involved, burned itself into my memory in a way I don't think will ever fully fade. He ran a hand through his hair. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You're overreacting." Of course I was. He tried one more angle. "Olivia, wait," he said, softer now. "Don't do this." And for a second, just a second, I felt it. That pull. 3 years doesn't disappear cleanly. Memories don't vanish on command. There's always a moment where you remember the good version of them, the version you fell in love with, the version you hoped they still were. But then I saw it again, not in my head, right in front of me, her. In my doorway, in my space, in my relationship, and his inability or unwillingness to remove her from it. That was the truth. Not the memories, not the potential, not the version I kept trying to protect. The truth was standing right there. So I picked up my bag, walked past him, didn't look at her, and left. I didn't go to my best friend's place. I thought about it. Of course I did. But I knew exactly how that would be twisted, how it would be used against me. So I stayed with a coworker instead. He had a spare room. No drama, no questions. Just space. The kind of space I had been asking for inside my own relationship for over a year. The next 2 days were strange. Not quiet, not peaceful, but strange. Because instead of reaching out to fix things, he escalated. Social media posts started appearing. Not directly about me, but obvious. Quotes about knowing your worth, about betrayal, about people showing their true colors, vague enough to avoid accountability, specific enough to paint a picture. Then his mother called me. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Olivia," she said immediately, voice tight, "you need to apologize." I leaned back against the wall. "For what?" "For embarrassing my son," she snapped, "and for disrespecting that sweet girl who has always been there for him." That sweet girl. I closed my eyes for a second. "With all due respect," I said carefully, "your son invited another woman to our anniversary dinner." "She's not just another woman," she insisted. "She's important to him." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." There was a pause, then a sharp exhale. "You're being unreasonable." "Am I?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She just hung up. Then came the messages from mutual friends. Apparently, he had told his version of the story, that I brought another man to sabotage our anniversary, that I humiliated him in public, that I'd been emotionally cheating. Emotionally cheating. That phrase sat heavy in my chest, because it was almost ironic. I didn't defend myself to most of them. I didn't have the energy. I just replied with one line. Ask him why I brought someone. The ones who actually did went quiet. Very quiet. And then came the message that finally ended any remaining doubt. He texted me late that night. "When are you coming home?" I stared at it for a second. Then, "Not sure." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "I need to know because she's going to stay over a few nights. Just until things settle down." I read that message 6 times, maybe more. Each time hoping I'd misunderstood, each time realizing I hadn't. She was going to stay. In my apartment, in my space, while I was gone, because I had abandoned him. I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up my phone and called my landlord, because suddenly, this wasn't just emotional anymore. It was practical, and the answer I got changed everything. My name was the only one on the lease, only mine. He had moved in with me. We had never added him officially, because he said it was too much paperwork. At the time, it felt like a small detail. Now, it felt like leverage. The landlord explained my options calmly. I could end the lease early, with a penalty. I could choose not to renew in 2 months. Or I could give formal notice that an unauthorized occupant needed to vacate. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there for a long time, thinking. That night, My best friend sent me a screenshot. It was from her, his ex, sitting on my couch, feet tucked under her, smiling. The caption read, "Comfort food and comfort company. Heart." I stared at it. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so clear, so unapologetically obvious. There was no confusion left, no gray area, no room for interpretation, just the truth, right there, in my living room, on my couch, with my boyfriend. And suddenly, I felt something shift again. Not pain, not anger, something colder, cleaner. A decision. I texted my best friend back, one word. Done! Because I was done negotiating, done explaining, done waiting for him to choose me. I had already been replaced. The only thing left was to act like I understood that. More updates coming. A week ago, I would have tried to fix it. That's the part I keep coming back to. A week ago, I would have sat down at that same kitchen table, heart wide open, ready to explain myself again. Ready to translate my feelings into something softer, easier for him to accept. A week ago, I would have stayed, but that version of me didn't survive the restaurant, or the message, or the image of another woman sitting comfortably in my space, like she had finally stepped into a role she'd been rehearsing for months. So I stopped trying to fix it, and I started ending it. The first thing I did was go back to the apartment, not dramatically, not confrontationally, quietly. I waited until I knew they'd both be at work. He still had his 9 to 5, and she apparently worked in marketing somewhere across town. I unlocked the door, walked inside, and for a second, I just stood there because it didn't feel like mine anymore. Same furniture, same layout, same light coming through the windows. But the energy was different, like something had shifted, permanently, like I had already left. Even before I physically did. I moved quickly after that. Documents first.
Passport. Birth certificate. Lease papers.
Then my electronics, laptop, backup drives, everything I couldn't afford to lose. Clothes, shoes, the things that were actually mine. I left most of the furniture. Some of it had been there before he moved in. Some of it I didn't want to fight over. I wasn't there to divide a life. I was there to reclaim mine. Before I left, I walked through the apartment one last time and took photos. Everything. The living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, the condition of the space, the things I was leaving behind. Not because I expected a fight, but because I had learned, the hard way, that clarity matters when people stop respecting boundaries. Then I sat down at the table. The same table where we'd had 100 small conversations that never went anywhere. And I wrote a letter. Not emotional, not angry.
Professional. Clear.
I stated that I was terminating our living arrangement, that I would continue paying my portion of the rent through the end of the lease in 2 months, but that I would not be returning. I added one more line, that any damage to my remaining property would be documented and handled accordingly. Cold? Maybe, but I was done trying to be warm in a situation that had burned me every time I reached for it. I left the letter on the counter, walked out. And this time, I didn't look back. He called me 31 times that day. I counted. I answered once. "What are you doing?" he demanded immediately. "You can't just leave like that. We had a life together," he added. I leaned against the wall in my coworker's hallway, phone pressed to my ear. "We had a life together," I repeated. Past tense. There was a pause. Then frustration. "Stop twisting things." "I'm not twisting anything," I said. "You made your choice at that restaurant." "I didn't do anything," he snapped. "I just wanted my friend there." And I just wanted a boyfriend who prioritized our relationship. Silence. Then, quieter. "Where are you staying?" "We're not doing this," I said. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not telling you where I am. I'm not having another conversation with her sitting next to you. And I'm not apologizing for finally standing up for myself." That last part landed. I heard it in the way his breathing changed, in the way his voice dropped just slightly when he spoke again. "You're overreacting," he said. Of course I was. "I'm done," I replied, and I hung up. The next few days were chaos. Not directly, but around me. His ex started texting me. At first, it was aggressive. "You're being dramatic. You're ruining something good. You don't understand him like I do." I didn't respond. Then the tone shifted. "We can all work this out. You're blowing this out of proportion. He still cares about you. Still." That word stuck out. Like I should be grateful for leftovers. Like I was supposed to accept partial affection while she occupied the rest. I screenshotted everything, didn't reply. Then she tried something else. She started reaching out to people I knew. Friends.
Acquaintances.
Anyone who might know where I was. One of my friends called me, confused. "Hey, she showed up at the bar last night asking about you." That's when something clicked. This wasn't about love. This wasn't even about him. This was about control, about winning. I told my best friend everything. He listened, like always. Then he said something that settled deep in my chest. "She's not fighting for him," he said. "She's fighting to win against you." I sat with that for a long time because he was right. And once you see something like that clearly, you can't unsee it. A few days later, something unexpected happened. One of his coworkers reached out to me. We'd met a few times at work events. Nothing close, just familiar. "I feel weird saying this," she said over the phone, "but I think you should know." Apparently, people at his job had been talking for months about him and his ex. People assumed they were together, not because of one thing, because of everything. The way he talked about her, the way she showed up, the way he never mentioned me. Some coworkers had even asked if he was single, because they never saw evidence that he wasn't. That part hurt more than I expected. Not because it was new, but because it confirmed something I had been trying not to fully accept. I was never first. Not publicly, not privately, not where it mattered. And suddenly, it didn't matter whether anything physical had happened between them, because emotionally, I had already been replaced. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a new apartment, smaller,
Quieter.
mine. Just mine. No shared history. No overlapping shadows. My best friend helped me move. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor because I didn't have furniture yet. At some point, he looked around and smiled. "Fresh start," he said. I nodded. "Yeah." He glanced at me. "You okay?" I thought about it. About everything. The restaurant, the messages, the apartment, the realization that I had been holding on to something that wasn't holding on to me. "I will be," I said. He nodded once. "That's enough." When the lease on the old apartment ended, I paid my portion like I said I would. From what I heard later, he couldn't afford it alone. So she moved in.
Officially.
2 months after I left, the same apartment he once called ours. A few people from our friend group reached out to apologize. Said they hadn't understood at first. Said they saw it now. I told them it was fine, because at that point, it was. Not because it didn't matter, but because I was no longer living inside it. He tried to contact me one last time. A long email. It started with blame. I gave up too easily. I didn't understand his friendships. I embarrassed him. Then it shifted.
Memories.
Trips. Moments. Small things I had almost forgotten. And then, closure. He wanted to meet, talk, get closure. I stared at the email for a long time. Then I wrote back, just a few lines. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but I'm not part of that anymore. I wish you well. Please don't contact me again." I sent it, and that was it. No reply, just silence. The kind of silence that finally feels like peace. She tried one last move, showed up at my workplace, walked into the lobby asking for me like she had a right. Reception called me, confused. I told them I wasn't available. Security escorted her out when she refused to leave. Apparently, she made a scene, said I was a coward, that I had ruined everything. I almost laughed when I heard, because for the first time, those words didn't land. They didn't stick. They just passed through. I heard through mutual friends later that they made it official. No one was surprised. Some people said they had been waiting for it. At his workplace, apparently, the reaction was basically, finally. I don't know if that gave me closure. Or just confirmation. Maybe both. These days, my apartment is quiet. Sometimes too quiet. But I've realized something about quiet. It's not empty, it's peaceful. There's no tension humming in the background. No second-guessing every interaction. No wondering where I stand in my own relationship. Just space. Real space. I bought a couch last weekend. A nice one. Picked it out myself. No compromise. No, what do you think? Just what I wanted. It felt strange and freeing. Work is good. Friends are still there. My best friend and I, still just that. Friends.
Solid. Uncomplicated.
The way it should be. I downloaded a dating app. Haven't really used it yet. Just knowing it's there feels like enough. A reminder that when I'm ready, I won't have to settle. About a week ago, I was getting coffee before work. Nothing special, just a random Tuesday morning, and I realized something. I felt okay. Not amazing. Not completely healed, but okay.
Calm. Present.
Not carrying the weight of someone else's choices on my shoulders anymore. And for the first time in months, I didn't have to force that feeling. It was just there. So yeah, that's the story. A woman plans an anniversary dinner. Her boyfriend invites his ex. He tells her to deal with it. She finally does, just not in the way he expected. If you're going through something similar, just know this. You are allowed to have standards. You are allowed to expect respect. And you are absolutely allowed to walk away from anyone who makes you feel like you have to compete for a place in your own life. Take care of yourselves.